Welcome, everyone, and let's dive right into this explainer. After 30 years, literally 3 decades of analyzing risk, probability, and disaster as an actuary, I've realized something truly fascinating. The ultimate formula for human success? It isn't about perfectly avoiding bad luck. It definitely isn't about ensuring zero volatility in your life because, let's face it, that's impossible. Instead, success is mathematically tied to our response. Today, we're deconstructing a really powerful philosophical concept of human agency, but we're going to do it entirely through the analytical lens of risk management and loss control.
So let's start right here. It is not what happens to you. In the world of risk management, we just accept that market crashes, catastrophic accidents, and sudden personal hurdles are, well, they're going to happen. They are statistically inevitable baseline risks. They are completely baked into the reality of living on a highly unpredictable planet. Yet most people incorrectly treat these uncontrollable volatilities as the absolute definitive end of their story. They let the event become their entire identity. This phrase begs us to reconsider that deeply flawed assumption and look at the math a bit differently.
And here is the full thought. It is not what happens to you that determines how far you go. It is what you do with what happens to you. I want you to think of this specific statement as the ultimate loss control mechanism. See, in my field, the hazard itself, the fire, the crash, the sudden downturn, isn't actually the primary issue. The real issue is almost always the lack of a mitigation strategy. Throughout this explainer, we're going to dissect this profoundly simple sentence, treating it as a robust, practical equation for compounding your success, even when you're operating in a high-risk, high-volatility environment.
Let's start with Section 1, the myth of circumstance. By isolating just the phrase, "what happens to you," we're looking at purely static variables. In actuarial terms, we call these uninsurable risks, or just raw data points. The delayed flights, the sudden economic downturns, the unexpected health hurdles, they are simply fixed events that have already occurred. They've been priced into your current reality. They are static data. Yet, so many of us spend vast reserves of our mental energy constantly auditing them, almost as if worrying could somehow rewrite the past and change that initial data point. Which brings us to a really crucial question. Do external events truly dictate our path? Ask yourself right now if you are operating like a fundamentally flawed risk model. One that over-indexes on historical shocks and blindly assumes external events have total predictive power over your future trajectory. Now, pointing a finger at a sudden roadblock is just basic human nature, for sure. But treating a random, statistical event as a definitive boundary on your potential, that is a massive analytical mistake. You are simply giving the hazard way too much power.
Moving right along to Section 2, the power of response.
Now look at these 3 words, what you do. This is what we call the mitigation phase, or actually, let's just call it active risk management. It's the single dynamic lever you have in an otherwise static, uncaring universe. It emphasizes the controllable, immediate choices we make in the direct aftermath of a system shock. When a risk event finally ends, an actuary doesn't just sit there and stare at the wreckage. No way. They look at how quickly, effectively, and efficiently the recovery strategy is deployed to stop the bleeding.
This is a brilliant way to illustrate the philosophical pivot of the quote. Think of it like a ledger. On one side, we have the sunk cost, or the claim event. It's done, it's paid out, the damage is locked. On the other side, we have future compounding value. To live mentally on that first side, obsessing over the damage, is a guaranteed statistical failure over a 30-year timeline. Shifting your weight to the other side means stepping out of the role of a passive victim and becoming the active, strategic manager of your own recovery and growth.
So I have to ask, which side of this equation receives your focus? Take a moment to honestly reflect on your own resource allocation. Where exactly are you allocating your highest value asset, your mental capital? Are you spending it constantly auditing a loss that already happened, looking backward at the math? Or are you investing it entirely in the recovery strategy, looking forward? Because let me tell you, the side of this equation that you fund with your attention mathematically determines your ultimate long-term outcome.
And that brings us to Section 3, determining your distance. Let's look really closely at the phrase, determines how far you go. This translates perfectly into what we call an actuarial long-term projection. Think about this for a second. The highest achievers in life aren't those who miraculously face the lowest volatility or the fewest risks. Statistically, they face just as many hurdles, downturns, and crises as anyone else. Instead, they're the ones who consistently execute optimal responses to those crises, allowing their upward trajectory to compound positively over decades of time.
The logic of our source text flows in a foolproof, repeatable three-step system. Step 1 is the risk event. An uncontrollable, inevitable shock occurs in your life. Step 2 is the mitigation strategy. You take a deliberate, controllable action immediately following the shock. And Step 3 is the adjusted projection. That specific, calculated response ultimately defines your new trajectory. It basically turns a seemingly abstract philosophical idea into a precise, data-driven flowchart for navigating daily chaos.
It is what you do with what happens to you. This right here, this is the ultimate risk management formula. It acts as an operational forge. It takes raw volatility, unrefined chaos, and systemic risk, and it forcibly converts that raw material into your forward momentum. It proves, without a doubt, that the response mechanism and not the inciting incident is the only true driver of your long-term success and resilience.
Okay, let's distill this entire framework into 3 practical takeaways for active risk management in your daily life. First, shift your focus inward and ruthlessly strengthen your internal controls. Second, clearly recognize the hard boundary between the insurable risks you can actively manage and the uncontrollable hazards you simply must accept. And third, prioritize execution over analysis paralysis. Deliberate strategic action will mathematically always supersede passive circumstance.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final analytical thought. Speaking purely probabilistically, a new, totally unpredictable challenge is going to happen to you next. The math practically guarantees it. So when it does arrive at your door, will you act as a passive data point in a generic risk event? Or will you aggressively deploy your mitigation strategy, take action, and define exactly how far you go? The choice is entirely yours. Keep learning and keep executing.